So I got tired of reading by myself, so I'm going to go ahead and read out loud. So, the biological basis for personality. Eysenck provided three arguments when making the case that individual differences in personality are based in biology. First, he noted the consistency of extroversion-introversion over time. For example, one study found that participants' scores on measures of extroversion-introversion remained fairly consistent over a span of 45 years. Of course, this finding alone does not establish that extroversion-introversion is determined through biology. It is possible that people remain in similar environments throughout their lives. Or the finding may simply mean that after this part of personality is established, it is difficult to change. Second, Eysenck pointed to the results of cross-cultural research. Investigators often find the same three dimensions of personality: extroversion, introversion, neuroticism, and psychoticism. In studies conducted in many different countries with people from very different cultures, moreover, the same three superfactors appear in studies using different data gathering methods. Eysenck maintained that this level of cross-cultural consistency would be unlikely unless biological factors were largely responsible for personality. Third, Eysenck noted the results of several studies in indicating that genetics plays an important role in determining a person's placement on each of the three personality dimensions. As presented in detail in Chapter 10, the research strongly suggests that how introverted or extroverted you are as a result of your genetic makeup. After examining the evidence from all of these sources and no doubt adding a bit of his own intuition, Eysenck asserted that about 2/3 of the variance in personality development can be traced to biological factors. Although the exact figure may not be this high, data from a continuing stream of studies suggests that extroverts and introverts differ on a number of biological measures. This is not to say that environmental factors do not play a role, but as the evidence reviewed in the next chapter makes clear, biology probably sets limits on how much we can change an introverted friend into a highly sociable individual, or the likelihood of shaping an impulsive, outgoing child into a calm, easygoing adult. Physiological differences, stimulation sensitivity, and behavior activation inhibition systems. Eysenck argued that extroverts and introverts differ not only in terms of behavior, but also in their physiological makeup. He originally maintained that extroverts and introverts have different levels of cerebral cortex arousal when in a non-stimulating resting state. Although it may sound backward at first, he proposed that extroverts generally have a lower level of cortical arousal than do introverts. Extroverts seek out highly arousing social behavior because their cortical arousal is well below their desired level when doing nothing. In a sense, highly extroverted people are simply trying to avoid unpleasant boredom. Their problem is feeding their need for stimulation. Introverts have the opposite problem. They typically operate at a cortical arousal level that is near or perhaps even above the optimal amount. These people select solitude and non-stimulating environments to keep their already high arousal level from becoming too aversive. For these reasons, extroverts enjoy a noisy party that introverts can't wait to leave. Sensitivity to stimulation. Unfortunately, a great deal of research has failed to uncover the different levels of base rate cortical arousal proposed by Eysenck. Introverts and extroverts do differ in how certain parts of their brains respond to emotional stimuli. However, they show no differences in brainwave activity when at rest or when asleep. But this does not mean that Eysenck's original theorizing was entirely off base. Rather, there is ample evidence that introverts are more sensitive to stimulation than extroverts. That is, introverts are more quickly and strongly aroused when exposed to external stimulation. Introverts are more likely to become aroused when they encounter loud music or the stimulation found in an active social encounter. Introverts are even more responsive than extroverts when exposed to chemical stimulants such as caffeine or nicotine. As a result of these research findings, many researchers now describe extroverts and introverts in terms of their different sensitivities to stimulation rather than differences in cortical activity. However, the effect is essentially the same. Because of physiological differences, introverts are more quickly overwhelmed by the stimulation of a crowded social gathering, whereas extroverts are likely to find the same gathering rather pleasant. Extroverts are easily bored by slow-moving plots and soft music, but introverts often find these subtle sources of stimulation engaging. Sensitivity to reinforcement, the behavioral approach system, and the behavioral inhibition system. Other researchers tie differences in extroversion and neuroticism to biologically based differences in sensitivity to reinforcement. According to reinforcement sensitivity theory, each human brain has a behavioral approach system, a BAS, and a behavioral inhibition system, a BIS. The exact regions of the brain and the specific processes involved in each of these hypothetical systems remain to be determined. Nonetheless, like other personality concepts, individuals are said to differ in the strength of these two systems, and these individual differences are relatively stable over time. People with a highly active BAS are intensely motivated to seek out and achieve pleasurable goals compared to people low on this dimension. They get more pleasure out of rewards and more enjoyment out of simply anticipating that rewards are coming. Individuals with an active BAS also experience more anger and frustration when they fall short of reaching anticipated sources of pleasure. People with a highly active BAS tend to be more apprehensive than others. They approach new situations warily or on a constant lookout for signs of danger, and are quick to retreat from a situation that they sense might lead to problems. Not surprisingly, they also are more likely to experience anxiety than people low on this dimension. Just how these two hypothetical systems are related to Ising's theory remains a matter of debate, but most researchers see a connection between the BAS and extroversion and a connection between the BIS and neuroticism. That is, people with a highly active BAS or behavioral approach system are similar to those scoring high in extroversion, and those with a highly active BIS behavioral inhibition system are similar to score high on neuroticism. Consistent with this analysis, scales designed to measure BAS and BIS correlate with scales measuring extroversion and neuroticism, respectively. However, the correlation is far from perfect. Thus, although the concepts are related, they probably are not exactly the same. Nonetheless, when looked at within this framework, we can think of extroverts as people who are more aware of and more attracted to situations that promise rewards than are introverts. When extroverts encounter an opportunity to have a good time, they are motivated to approach the object of their desire. As a result, extroverts are more impulsive than introverts and are more likely to find themselves in the middle of a party or riding on a roller coaster. One implication of this description is that extroverts aren't necessarily attracted to all social situations, but only to those that are likely to be enjoyable. Consistent with this hypothesis, one team of researchers found that extroverts actually preferred non-social situations, such as going for a walk alone, more than introverts did if they thought the experience would be pleasant. How do you spend your spare time? If you're an extrovert, it probably never occurs to you to take a long walk by yourself. If you're an introvert, you may rely on a long walk to reduce your arousal level after an intense and active day. And then a little excerpt on Hans J. Ising, 1916 to 1997. I know, I'm a loser. Just kidding. If heredity plays a large role in determining personality, we might say that Hans Ising was born to be the center of attention in whatever field he entered. Ising was born in Germany into a family of celebrities. His father, Edward Ising, was an accomplished actor and singer, something of a matinee idol in Europe. His mother, whose stage name was Helga Molander, was a silent film star. They planned a glamorous career in the entertainment field for Hans, who at age 8 had a small role in a motion picture. However, like many Hollywood marriages today, Ising's parents divorced when he was young, only to later marry other show business people. Most of Ising's early years were spent with his grandmother in Berlin. Upon graduating from public school in Germany, the rebellious Ising decided not only to pursue a career in physics and astronomy, much to his family's displeasure, but also to do so abroad. After a year in France, he moved to England, where he eventually completed his PhD at the University of London, like so many others at the time. Ising left Germany in 1934 in part to escape the rise of the Nazis. Faced with the choice of having to join the Nazi stormtroops, if I wanted to go to a university, he wrote, I knew that there was no future for me in my unhappy homeland. Because he was a German citizen, Isaac was prohibited from joining the British military and spent World War II working in an emergency hospital. Following the war, he returned to the University of London, where his long career produced 79 books and more than 1,000 journal articles. Although Isaac never pursued the career in show business his parents desired, he did not avoid the public's eye. In fact, he sought out and dove right into some of the biggest controversies in psychology. He was, in one biographer's words, a magnet for attention. In 1952, Isaac published a paper challenging the effectiveness of psychotherapy. He was especially critical of psychoanalysis, pointing out that empirical evidence at the time showed psychoanalysis to be no better than receiving no treatment at all. More controversy occurred when he stated that individual differences in intelligence are largely inherited. As a result, Isaac was sometimes unfairly associated with those who proposed inherent racial differences in intelligence. In 1980, Isaac published a book arguing that the case for cigarettes as a cause of health problems was not as strong as many people claimed. Critics were particularly harsh when they discovered that some of this work had been sponsored by American tobacco companies. This lifelong combative style caused one biographer to call Isaac the controversialist in the intellectual world. Isaac would no doubt have enjoyed this title from the days of opposition to Nazism. I don't know how to say that word. To Nazism? In my early youth, through my stand against Freudianism and projective techniques, to my advocacy of behavior therapy and genetic studies, to more recent issues, I have usually been against the establishment and in favor of the rebels, he wrote. But I prefer to think that on these issues, the majority were wrong and I was right. Okay, and that's that. And next we're going to read about